If you run away from what you're afraid of, then it reviews you. Let's talk about caught stealing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back at the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we are going to be debating or discussing caught stealing. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. Alright, so what I'm going to recommend that you guys should watch that I watched recently is 2012. I don't know how I ended up on 2012. I've definitely seen it before watching it. I think I don't remember when I watched it, but it was last week. And I enjoyed it. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't remember when watching it, but it's a really fun film. If you guys don't know what 2012 is about, it's literally about the end of the world. People preparing for the end of the world, and they kind of like the governments build like a big boat where, you know, a select few of civilization enter that boat and animals, and yeah, just preparation for that. You already know what you're gonna get with those type of films, but it's a fun film. It's a fun film. Storytelling wise, it's I wouldn't say that it's, you know, it's known for that. I just think it's kind of just known for the whole. It's for the post-apocalyptic lovers. For you guys that like post-apocalyptic stuff, the end of the world stuff. If you love end of the world stuff and you haven't seen this film, I would recommend you to go watch it. Even if you don't like end of the world stuff, I do think there's enough story in this where you will like, because it's got characters that you don't want to see die. So it's definitely got those obnoxious characters that you hate, that you want to see. You know, the characters that are just annoying that you end up like, that you want to see die. And I think, you know, your needs will be satisfied if that is a concern that you have when watching these type of films. But yeah, I would definitely say, well, this is a good one. You should go watch it.
Were you aware of the 2012 conspiracy theories?
Yeah, when that came out, I was so scared. I'll be honest with you. Like when 2012, I remember that year, the countdown. I always watch the news with my family. I'm always in church, you know, on the New Year's Eve when it's gonna turn New Year's. So when there was the countdown, I swear to you, I was actually shitting bricks. Mind my language. Like I was scared. So when it did happen, I was really. That's why this movie was like. I mean, this movie was definitely like I wouldn't say it was classic, but I will say it definitely has deep nostalgia. You'll remember this film and I think most people will remember this film because of that reason alone. 2012 was a year everyone thought that we were gonna die. The end of the world was gonna happen.
You were like 16, 17 when that happened, right? Something like that?
I believe I'm 28 now. Yeah. So,
but the movie itself doesn't really tie into the prophecy, right? It's just the world ends.
No. Yeah. It doesn't kind of relate to anything which was said in the real world. From what I remember, I don't. What happened again? I'm not gonna recall what happened, but they ended up bringing it to White House, and then yeah, that's how it transpired. But it wasn't kind of like. I think that's kind of like a fault of the film, or like a critique I would have. They should have kind of like made it more relatable to what was being broadcasted in real life, and kind of incorporated that. It would have made it much better.
Certainly less generic, right? Because the actual conspiracy theory is that the Mayans mapped out their calendars for like thousands of years into the future, and their calendar ends in 2012, like in the equivalent of our 2012. And that sounds ominous, right? This civilization that was really big into astronomy, if I remember correctly, and had these detailed calendars that were really important to their culture, and that calendar just ends. Like this feels a little bit creepy, right? Until you realize that the Mayan calendar has like these 5,000 year or 3,000 year or something like that, like blocks. And like the current one just ends in 2012. And then a new one starts. That's the part that nobody told you. Because this is like looking at a calendar and saying, oh no, it's like December 24th, the world ends. I'm looking at the calendar and it just ends in a week. The world is good. Like, that's what this was. There wasn't anything else to it. The Mayans did not predict that the world would end. Somebody just took the calendar and said, oh, the calendar ends. That means the world must end. And then they left out the first part, and it just said the Mayans said it would end in 2012. First of all, what do the Mayans know? Second of all, no, that's when a new calendar starts. So, but like people actually like killed themselves. People actually quit their jobs. They actually like spent their life savings in the belief that this was going to happen. You know, so a whole bunch of lives were ruined by this nonsense. And it's just simply like 3,000 years ago or whatever, somebody made a calendar that happens to end, you know, on this date. And that's it. That's all there was to it. But anyway,
Yeah.
and then this movie comes. So like the reason why I was always kind of a little bit like not very charitable towards this movie is, number one, it's based on this nonsense, and second of all, it doesn't even deal with the nonsense. It doesn't even say, okay, what if this was real? It just says, hey, let's just end the world. And it happens to be in 20 because that's on people's minds.
Yeah.
Like, am I off base, or is that what happened?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't cover anything you just said. It's literally just the world ends.
Yeah.
Rich people make it. Well, rich people have a first way ticket, and then they don't. They all don't end up making. Well, actually, no, they do actually end up making it. Which kind of, I understand why it would leave salt in someone's mouth. Is that the saying? Salt in someone's mouth.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, you get you get what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
I think because the rich people, they were the ones that ended up making it at the end. So I was like, oh damn! Like when you think of it, it's like, well, that's pretty rubbish. That's a bad. Yeah, you say so. Not rubbish, but that's pretty shit. But yeah, so yeah, it doesn't cover none of that. It's just pretty generic, but it's fun. It's fun generic. It's fun generic.
And I kind of want to watch that movie. Like, just actually show me what this like the problem is, there isn't even a real prophecy, right? Like that, but just take it completely seriously. Like, what if this was real? Like that's why I get on board again. But nobody made that movie, as far as I know.
That's fun though. They should have covered that though, which is a bit annoying because like, and that's so easy to cover. I don't think you have to go in depth or nothing. You could just show like a little 3-minute, 2-minute scene of that if you wanted to. Even though it would be fun if they went a bit in depth with it. However, if they didn't want to go in depth with it, they could have just shown like, a 3-minute clip and then show how that, finding ends up blown out of proportion, leading to,
Yeah, missed opportunity.
Or maybe you think it would be fun if they did that, right? But people are starting to plan for the end of the world, and then the ending is the world doesn't end, but they showed what you said, like people unfortunately will kill, they commit suicide, people quitting their jobs, actually planning for this. That, I think that could have been, I wouldn't say it would have been better, but it would have been definitely it would have been fun to watch as well. Well, not fun to watch, that's actually terrible to kind of say.
There's a great Simpsons episode about this where they think the world's going to end and then it doesn't, and then everybody's burnt all the bridges and has to kind of get their job back and all of that.
Was that an old episode, or was that like a recent? Because I think I remember that episode that you're referring to.
Pretty early, sometime in the first 10 seasons, the good ones.
Yeah, I think I remember that one.
All right. The best thing I watched this week is Rob Roy, which is a 1995 historical biographical drama. So Rob Roy was like a Scottish freedom fighter against the English in like the 1700s. And this movie essentially tells a fairly idealized version of his story. So Rob Roy is like this villager who lives in the Scottish Highlands, and the lowlands are under English control. And he goes to the local aristocrat to borrow some money to develop his farm, right? So this is a movie about banking and loans and interest rates and that sort of thing. So he borrows this money, £1,000, right? Which is a huge amount for him for the time and so on. And then the money gets stolen as it's brought to him. And the aristocrat accuses him of having stolen it so that he doesn't have to pay it back. And that then kind of spirals into this feud where they, like the English send their troops to get the money back, and they burn some farms, and the Scottish fight back, kill some English people, and it escalates. And this entire thing then kind of comes down to a duel between the aristocrat and Rob Roy, who has kind of become this legendary freedom fighter, who has become like a symbol for like Scottish independence and Scottish just standing up to the Englishness, more or less without his doing it, just because he stands up for the right thing and does the right thing and stands by his principles. He's kind of rallying these people around it, and he's kind of a thorn in the sides of the English. And it's not completely historical, but it portrays Rob Roy as this kind of borderline saint. But it's still a really, really good story where the conflict is really well motivated, where the movie goes into extreme care and detail to justify the conflict, where Rob Roy believes what he believes and the English aristocrat believes what he believes. And then there's like other characters who are involved in this, who all have their own role to play. And what each character believes and what they do because of this is really meticulously motivated. And that is where the conflict comes from. Nobody's being stupid in this. Everybody is acting on the information they have, and on like that is colored by their prejudices about the English or the Scottish, whichever applies, and their expectations and risk and uncertainty and all of that. It's about honor. It's about kind of colonialism in a sense, because the English are occupying the lowlands, right? And they're kind of trying to expand into the highlands. And there's like these three different, like there are these anglicized Scottish aristocrats who are collaborating with the English and all. Like there's a whole lot of stuff going on here that is really interesting and really well acted, really well written. And it kind of gives you a feel for the time without being all that historically accurate in terms of the actual events and the actual characters. And it was just a really good watch. It's got some amazing sword fights in it. Some people are saying it's got the best sword fight in all of cinematic history, and I'm not sure about that, but it's really good. I'd never heard of this person before. The basic story of it is real, like really happened. That was then the basis for this movie and so on, right? And so it's just, I found this completely by accident, never heard of Rob Roy before, and it was just a cool story. And I think it came out the same year as Braveheart, which completely overshadowed it, but this is just much, much better. And like, if you like historical drama, if you like just like good drama, if you like well motivated conflicts and interesting characters and layered characters, like this movie just runs circles around Braveheart while telling like a similar kind of story. 95.
95. Okay. And where'd you watch it?
I think it was on Amazon Prime in the UK.
Okay, I want to check out.
So strong recommendation, and it's one of those movies I'd never heard of. Nobody had ever recommended it to me. I might never have found this. So for that reason, if you like historical drama, if you like the era, if you like that cultural context, absolutely, like this is absolutely a good watch.
Right. Well, thank you very much. So it looks like it's time for the main event.
So Caught Stealing is a dark comedy crime thriller movie about this guy who is kind of drifting through life after he kind of lost his chance at being a baseball player in high school, and he's kind of just living and working as a bartender and like not doing anything important. And he lives in New York in the 90s. And then his neighbor, who is this English punk, right? He goes to him and say, "Hey, I need to go to England for a while. My dad is dying. Can you just watch my cat?" And then as Hank goes to feed the cat one day, Russian mobsters show up and start asking where the punk is, and things escalate from there. And it turns out that his friend owes like 3 different crime organizations vast amounts of money, and they think he took the money and ran. And now Hank keeps getting drawn into that conflict as these 3 different crime gangs demand their money. And that then spirals out of control, where it kind of starts bleeding into Hank's personal life, and the plot then escalates from there as he tries to get out of this. So what did we think of Caught Stealing?
I liked this film. I really liked how it escalated, and I liked the different tones that were used, because it was very intense. And obviously it's a crime thriller mixed with like, elements of dark comedy. So I was like, it felt so A24. Literally, it felt so A24. So I had a feeling that it was going to be pretty, like it was going to feel and be pretty raw, because especially the way that New York, because I think it was based in like 1998, New York Times. So it kind of did give you that feel, even though it wasn't really going too much into obviously like the environment. It was still there, and the way that the story was kind of like in that world, I think it kind of like made it better for me personally. It just gave that feel. It's giving me insight of what New York was like back in the day. Overall, I liked the film. I wouldn't say it was a classic or it was memorable. However, for what I paid for, that cinema ticket, I would definitely say it was worth it. It was a really good film. Individual performances were good. Some skeptical decisions near the end, which made it kind of, I wouldn't say it affected my experience, but I said, they could have kind of like just cleaned that up a bit. But not all films can be perfect, you know what I'm saying? Hardly any films are perfect. But overall, I'd say I had a good time with this one.
Yeah, so I walked into this movie not expecting anything. Same. Like just based on, like, I had not heard of it. I make a point not to follow like movie announcements, because they try to build hype for it like years in advance. And by the time the movie actually comes out, I've forgotten all about it, or like, I just as a habit, I don't follow movie news. Just whatever comes out, and I like it or I don't, right? And when I kind of saw this, when I read the synopsis for this, before going in, it sounded extremely generic. Like there was nothing that caught my eye. And that kind of is more a statement about the people who write these summaries than the actual quality of this movie. Because when I actually saw it, it took me a little bit. Like the first 20 minutes or so are a little bit grating. Like there are some annoying characters in this, or at least they're written as annoying in the first 20 minutes. And then once the plot actually starts going, it's like a thrill ride. Like it's like a roller coaster. Like it just keeps going faster and faster. And, the turns get tighter. And before I knew it, I was really having fun, right? Which I did not expect at all. I think the story is really tightly plotted. Hank has a lot going on. The different characters have a lot going on. There's a whole bunch of symbolism, and like structure-wise, it's really strong, where a lot of care goes into Hank's journey and what he does and why and where, and even the mistakes he makes are extremely well motivated and say a lot about him and drive the story. And so it's really satisfying. This is not really a spoiler to say he gets his act together in the end, but he does. And when that happens, it's really, really satisfying, because we've just spent so much time watching him screw up and make things worse. And then when he finally gets it together, it feels so good. It's been a while since I've cared this much about a character, honestly. I also think this movie just shows what it's like when you actually take the craft of writing, of creating a story seriously and do it correctly. Like his motivations and his character arc and the symbolism and recurring motifs and, subtext and all of that fires on all cylinders. And that by itself doesn't make a good movie, but having those things makes the movie better and increases your odds of the movie working. And it works because of these things, where it just makes sense, it just feels right, and you just care about what's going on. And that is not something that every movie can say about itself. So let's talk about it.
We should start off talking about Austin Butler. I feel like that's I wouldn't say that's the main attraction, but the story is mainly revolved around him. So how do you feel about how the portrayal of the everyman caught in a bad situation and him being haunted by his past was conveyed in this film? Because for me, personally, at first, I didn't see how the two not coexisted, but, fell together. I was trying to see kind of like how they both relate. And at first, I was like, I don't see it. It felt random linking his past to what's currently going on with him now. Because what's currently going on with him now is unjustified. And I was like, damn, that's what made it even more intense. Because it was like, damn, this is so unfair. Because he doesn't even deserve what the hell's going on. But then, with how it kind of like ended and how he kind of like came into realization of why he's in the position that he's in now, it was kind of like an awakening for him. And I was like, oh, okay, so it kind of was relevant for him to kind of like move on. Like he was in a situation which kind of feels undeserved, but at the same time is like, you kind of do in a way deserve to be in there. Not because you accidentally killed your friend, but because not how you went about it, but pretty much you didn't even, it's not that some would say that he kind of like blocked that feeling out of sorrow and kind of like being remorseful for what actually happened, but some would say that, but others would say, well, all you could care about was your baseball career. If that makes sense, you know what I'm saying? All you cared about was your baseball career and how that ended your career. You didn't even care about your friend actually dying. And then when you start seeing, obviously, the dreams that he kept on having, how it was haunting him, was like, okay, that situation that you were put in, yeah, technically it was an accident. You shouldn't have been in that situation. But at the same time, it was a situation which needed to happen in order for you to, in a way, to feel remorseful and move on with your life, proceed with your life, and kind of like, you know what I'm saying, accept what you done, but at the same time, take your life seriously, because obviously he was going through certain situations where he was gonna, obviously with his liver, and he was already dealing with health problems, so death was kind of like at the corner, if that made sense. So what I'm saying sounds a bit convoluted, but I just tried to make sense of how they both relate, and I think that's kind of how I took it. With you, how did you find that portrayal, and how did you find, like, what did you think, did you think that there was any relatability with with the two themes?
So I think there's like two different things here. Like, first of all, Austin Butler, like, he absolutely carries this movie. Like, he has to. Like, everything is so focused on him. And before this, I was not convinced he was a good actor. And some people are gonna yell at me for this, but like, I've seen him in Dune, I've seen him in Bike Riders, and one or two other things, and he always kind of shows up, looks handsome, looks in the camera, is like sulks a little bit, and it's kind of his performance. And that is what I'd seen of him so far. And this movie convinced me that that guy is an actor. Like, he can actually act, and he absolutely carries this movie, and he brings this character to life, and he conveys where like Hank is at as a person, right? Like all his mistakes and all his fears. And the movie is like, in the first half at least of the movie, or maybe the first 2 acts, you might say, the entire thing is driven by Hank trying to not take responsibility, right? Like it took me a while to figure out that this is what the movie is about, but that is what it is about, right? It's about a guy who has been running away from his responsibilities. And that is where kind of the tagline quote, like if you run away from what you're afraid of, it will own you, right? It will control your life. And that is basically what this is about, right? And he has to convey like this insecurity and this indecisiveness and this attempt to kind of kick the can down the road, right? And not deal with whatever his problem is until it's too late, until he's out of options. The movie systematically takes away his other options until it's only him and the bad guys. And that is where he takes charge, right? And once we were at that point, it felt so satisfying when he actually did. He does not simply spring into action, right? He does not simply take the fight to the bad guys. He tries not to, right? He tries to de-escalate. He tries to run away. He tries to hide. He goes to the cops. He loses a kidney over it, right? And he still wants to just be left alone, right? But they keep pushing and they keep taking away his resources, right? The cop is fake. His girlfriend gets killed. The friend leaves town. Towards the end, he's the only one who's left, right? And that is something that I think is done masterfully, where you just care about all his excuses and all his nonsense and all his attempts. Like in a lesser movie, when he loses his kidney and his girlfriend, as a paramedic, gives him the sensible advice of do not to drink alcohol, right? Like you are no longer able to process alcohol properly. So what does he do? He goes to the bar and he gets drunk, because that is how he runs away from his problems. And it doesn't go well. It makes things even worse. So every time he tries to run away from his problems, they catch up with him and they brought their big brother, right? It's like that's how that goes, right? And that's the bulk of the movie, right? Until he's at that point where he has no other choice than to own up to his fears and to his challenges. Because if he doesn't, nobody else will. People have already gotten hurt because of it. And there's the looming specter of, if he doesn't deal with this, somebody will get to his mom and will hurt her, right? So like this will keep going and he will lose everybody he cares about. And that is what finally drives him to the point where he says, okay, I have to do something because I tried everything else. It's like, I have to do the right thing because I've tried everything else and it didn't work, right? That's basically like the ethos of this movie. And it's just so good at it. Like it makes me believe every step of the way. And a lesser movie would make that tedious, right? Like when he does stupid things like getting drunk just days after having lost a kidney. I've seen movies like this, like where a character does something incredibly stupid for no discernible reason, just for drama. And watching somebody do something stupid for no reason is not fun, for me at least. But here, like it followed from his character and it drove the plot and there were consequences for it. And the movie would not work if he didn't do this. So I think on that level, it's really excellent.
Yeah. Do you think the supporting cast was meaningful to his journey? Of course it was meaningful because you really liked it, but how were they meaningful to his journey? For example, like Zoe Kravitz's character and obviously Regina's character, the fake police officer. What for you made this film not be, as you would say, a lame film? Because I think you've definitely kind of like rated this film. So of course, when it comes to his journey in general, I'm sure it's just not his story. There's obviously, you know, the side characters, obviously their incorporation to it. So what about their characters and their, their side, well, not side stories, but their incorporation into his storyline that you enjoyed?
So they all tie into what this movie is, right? Like its structure and the plot sequences and Hank's motivations, right? Like Yvonne, right, the girlfriend, right, keeps trying to help him, and he kind of rejects her help, sort of, right? Like he does throw away the alcohol, but then he goes to the bar to get drunk. Like he kind of recognizes that she's right, but he can't quite bring himself to take that much charge and control of his life, right? And then when he drags her into the conflict with the Russians, she gets killed as a result. And that absolutely impacts him, right? Like this whole thing about him losing all his support and all his friends and all his options until nothing is left, that is absolutely essential to the story. And the story would not unfold if Yvonne didn't exist, and it would not unfold the same way if she didn't die. Similarly, the detective, Roman, right? If she didn't exist, this would be a different story because he runs to the police several times, right? And he just outright tells her, I'm scared. I just want to get away from this. I want this to stop. And then she is a crooked cop who works with the Russians, right? And that betrayal itself is also really important for the story. And it means one more thing that he should be able to rely on has been taken away. And kind of you go down the list, right? Like Russ like jumps all this stuff on him. And then when he comes back, you think, okay, Hank now has a friend. But no, Russ immediately betrays him because it benefits him in the short term, right? He just thinks he can offload this problem on Hank, and all he has to do is kill his friend. And he's okay with that. And, that again takes away like this one plank of support for Hank, right? So all of these characters kind of tie into this. And then you've got the Hebrews, right? Who are mostly bad guys, but then he makes a deal with them and kind of spends a whole bunch of time with them. And they only become allies to the extent that they do because he takes action, right? Because he makes them. And that is kind of the beginning of him developing agency and him learning how to deal with this situation instead of running away from it. So you can go down the list, like every character in this is like the cat is the same way, right? Where he says in the beginning, he doesn't like cats and he basically just wants to feed it and be done with it. And he doesn't really care about the cat, but he keeps going back for the cat and he keeps taking risks to make sure the cat is okay. And then the cat in the end is essential for his plan working because he hides the key in the bandage, right, of the cat. It all hangs together, and if you take out any of these pieces, the story doesn't work anymore.
One thing that I really did like about the film was mainly its pacing. Of course, the side characters, I do agree, like they were definitely a necessity when it comes to his storyline, especially Russ. Like he was like the catalyst for for the entire plot. But one thing that I really did enjoy was kind of like the pacing of it, in terms of like it felt like a murder every 10 minutes, and I think that was a great way to convey the point of what happens when you run away from responsibility, because it does feel like that when you're running away from responsibilities. It just feels like things are just stacking up. You know what I'm saying? It's just stacking up, and then you're just putting it feels like you're sinking in what's the sand thing, the sand pits or whatever it's called, but quicksand. Yes, it literally feels like that, and it felt like that when I was watching this, and it was definitely good how it resolved. So I definitely agree with your points that you made regarding, like, it wouldn't have worked if the way how the side stories, the side characters involvement and how it kind of like resolved as well. It definitely did add to the journey.
I would say there are no side stories because it's all one big puzzle. If you take any piece, or it's a Jenga tower. If you take any piece away, Jenga is not the perfect example because you actually can take pieces away in Jenga. But you know what I mean? Like they take one piece away and the entire thing falls apart, right? I'm not sure what analogy this is, but it's not Jenga. Yeah, so I think that was one really satisfying thing when kind of like in the beginning there are a whole bunch of pieces where you're not sure why they're there, right? Like why is Russ so weird? Like he's not that weird, right? He's like in English punk, right? But why is he in English punk in 1995 or 1998 New York, right? So it seems a bit random. Or why is Hank so obsessed with baseball stats? And you find out why, because baseball used to be his thing, like his entire life, and because of his accident, he no longer can do this. He can no longer play, and it's the thing that connects him with his mother, which is like one of the few things that he still has, right? And like the person he's the closest to, and you ask, okay, why does he have to call her every day, right? Like, isn't this a bit weird? Like, why does like a 30-year-old have to call his mother every day, right? That goes way beyond simply being in touch, right? Like that's obsessive at this point, but it all kind of comes together in the end, right? And why does he not drive? Why is he so obsessed about seatbelts, right? And you learn all of this, right? And then you learn about the accident, and you realize that he was drinking, he was wearing his seatbelt, and that is why he survived. And he was driving, which is why he can no longer drive. And because of the accident, he can no longer play baseball. So these pieces kind of come together in these nightmares that he has about the accident. And that kind of, once you know this, you kind of everything about his character makes sense. Not just the affectations, but also why he is so afraid of taking risks and of getting attached to things and of confronting problems, because he has kind of learned that that doesn't go well.
Did you have any? Because I feel like which rightfully so, we've praised this film quite a lot. Did you have any issues with the film? Because with me personally, it's not really too big. It's just obviously the way that it ended, the way that it was resolved was one, and another one was how one of the characters, I wouldn't say involvement, but kind of like how he was dealt with in the film was like, one of the Russian guys, the short one, the one that he ended up knocking out. I think the way that his story ended really didn't kind of like make sense in a way, because it's like, you know what, it's crazy because it kind of ended off in a way where he's kind of like still on the run from his responsibilities, even though it was resolved and he did face up to his responsibilities, but he was still on the run in a way, because number one, the way that a knockout, like he should have, I'm not saying he should have killed him because he's not a killer, but if you think about it, it's like, well, I'm sure when he wakes up he's gonna go out looking for you, which is number one. And number two, the way that it ended with the whole him stealing Russ's identity and then passing the border control like it was nothing. I'm like, okay,
This was
that's
1998. It was a different time.
Okay.
So you were what, like in 2001? You were like 4, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you don't remember a time before 9/11? Before 9/11, you could basically walk onto a plane.
Damn.
Like all this security theater happened after 9/11. And so when he just shows up with a fake passport and a dodgy accent, you might have seen like old romantic comedies where somebody leaves on a plane and then there's a last minute reunion and the guy usually kind of runs up to the gate to get her back, right? You know what I mean? That worked before 9/11. You could just hang out at an airport. And so the fact that this is 1998 means that security checks are not as good. Like the technology is not as good, and like the scrutiny is not as high. So we see how his accent kind of doesn't hold up, right? Like the airplane employee is kind of looking at him, looking at the passport. She's not sure, but she's not motivated enough to read. Like she's just supposed to ask if you packed your bag yourself. Ultimately, that's and type in your passport number. That's kind of what she's supposed to do. She's not supposed to be border control, right? And so she just waves him through, even though she's pretty sure that there's something up with this guy, right? But like, it's not that he fools everybody. He explicitly doesn't fool anybody, and he still kind of muddles through in the end.
Okay, cool. That makes the film better for me then. That does, but I'm like, okay, it felt unrealistic, but it's not actually. It's like you said, it was just bad back in the day. So that's actually pretty. I like that. That's good then. I like that. But what do you think it meant, that transformation from him going to obviously Hank to Russ? Do you feel like it did anything for his character arc?
There's a few things here. So the whole movie is about running away from your problems, right? And that is kind of what he does in the end. But it's the only way he can win, right? Like there's no way. Like the police is corrupt. He's linked to like 6 different deaths, right? At least. There's no way he really gets out of this. But he has a bag full of money, and he sends half of it, which is about $2 million, to his mother, and he takes the rest to kind of go into exile in Mexico or something like that, right? There's a few things going on here. On the one hand, like the ending is about him taking agency and no longer running away from his problems and being true to himself. And then in the end, he disguises himself as somebody else and runs away from his problems. Right? So there's something there, right? Like there's like, and then he ends up on the beach, right? On this Mexican island or beach town or whatever. And that is the cop's dream. The cop gives him this, like this was not his life dream, right? So the guy who has not been planning for the future, who has been running away from his problems, who has been in denial about everything, right? Ends up living somebody else's dream because he can't think of anything else, and because he has to get away, but he could pick anything, right? With $2 million, you can, in 1998, you can get pretty far. And he chooses somebody else's dream, and it's Detective Roman, who tells him she grew up in this dodgy neighborhood, and the only good thing about the projects was this cookie that you could get at this cafe, right? At this diner. Everything else is something you run away from. Again, running away from your problems, right? Her dream is to one day make it big so that she can retire on a beach and not worry about anything and just run away from everything. And the only thing she will miss is the cookie. Hank does exactly that at the end. I'm not sure what it says exactly, but it definitely rhymes, right? This whole thing about he's running away because he has learned to no longer run away, and he is true to himself, but he does it under a false name and all of that, right? So there's like like several different layers of irony here. I'm not sure it has a big statement at the end, but I think it's more about a character moment that this time it's his choice, right? Like every time he ran away from his problems is because he couldn't take charge, he couldn't make a decision, he was afraid to make the wrong decision, he was afraid of confronting the problem. And here he does superficially the things that he used to do, but now he does it on purpose. Now he does it because it's his choice and because it's part of a plan. And that is different than when he just keeps drinking the day away because he can't confront how much his life sucks. That is different. And I think that is ultimately the character moment that we arrive at in the end, where he is now an actualized person. He is taking charge of his choices. He is doing what he thinks he needs to do.
I didn't even realize he's living the dream of the fake detective. Thank you. Thank you for that insight, Flipping. It felt like I wasn't sleeping, but obviously based on what you're saying, it feels like I was sleeping because I didn't realize most of the stuff that you mentioned. But
by itself, it's a little bit arbitrary or random, right? Like why go to this place, right? Why not hide somewhere else? Why not go, anywhere else, right? Like, you can come up with a dozen ways of hiding somewhere in the US where nobody will find you, right? In some, in a trailer park, like in the desert or something, right? Where nobody will ever find you. But no, he does this, right? And it's actually more dangerous, right? Because he has to go through like a passport control, right? So it's not actually the easy way out, right? This is like this is the dangerous version. But it's the only thing that actually solves this problem because now he's out of reach of all the people, including the police, right? Who are after him.
It's crazy to think an ordinary man is against different criminal factions, the Russians, the Jewish mobsters of the day, cause
there's the Puerto Ricans as well, right? But yeah, I think all the details kind of matter, right? Like it feels like, I think if I watch this again, I think all the details would hold up. All the details would say, okay, this is why he's doing this, and this seemingly random thing that happens in the movie ends up mattering later on. That is, I think, why it was so satisfying, and this is kind of as part of this whole take the basics of storytelling seriously, because this is like setup and payoff, right? Like you set up this whole thing about the seatbelts, and he doesn't drive, and things like that, and then he ends up winning because the Hebrews are not putting on the seatbelt, and they're not paying attention to him, and they're making him drive, and so he can drive them into this pole where only he survives, right? And it's like it's pretty obvious, it's almost basic, but it works. These pieces all come together, and the details that seemed random and weird in the beginning end up coming together in the end in a way that makes sense for where he is at as a person. I think that is part of why I ended up liking this movie so much, because like everything is intentional, right? Like it's a really tightly plotted, and all the details that are kind of floating around this movie end up mattering in one way or another.
At what point for you though in the film did you feel like he stopped being like an innocent victim and transformed into someone that was starting to make like, active moral decisions when it comes to his external problems and his internal problems?
After he kills Russ. Because up until that point, he's looking for a way out. Up until that point, he's trying to work with the cops, he's trying to work with Russ, he's trying to work with the Hebrews, he's trying to work with the Russians, and he's always punished for it. Like every time they backstab him, or they use him or exploit him, or it ends up hurting him or somebody he cares about in one way or another. At that point, he realizes he's out of options. He now no longer has anybody, and it's him or nothing. And that is when he picks up the phone, like Russ's phone, calls the Russians, I think, and starts making demands, right? And that is where he links up with the Hebrews, and he gets them to go after the Russians and so on, right? And they kill the Russians for him, and then he kills them. But the turning point is when he really tried to, like, his plan is not that difficult in the beginning, right? He wants to give them the money back, but they just don't trust him, and so they will simply not make it easy for him, and he will not come out of this alive. And in the process, like the longer he waits, the more people keep dying. And that is why he ends up at this point where he has to kind of come up with this plan of using the Hebrews against the Russians.
And there was even a point in the film where, because I do agree with you, I do believe that was definitely the point in the film where he started, making active decisions, trying to like pretty much get out of this situation.
Another part that really ties into this entire symbolism and everything mattering, right, is this being New York in the 90s. So in the 90s, New York was kind of at this turning point where in the 70s and 80s had been really run down. So if you see movies from that era, it's like really grimy and there's crime everywhere and there's constant police going on, right? Like it felt like the world was ending, right? And there's when anybody with any kind of money would flee out into the suburbs and you kind of leave the city for, like, this is how it is in the US in many cases, that the city is where the poor people live and the rich people are, or the somewhat, like anybody who has any kind of money is in the suburbs, right? Which is generally not how it is in Europe, right? It's kind of the other way around over here. And the 70s and 80s are why this happened, right? Because the cities were so overrun with crime and they were so dirty and run down. And by the 90s, New York was kind of being cleaned up and was turning into, like, if you've been to New York in the last 15 years or whatever, it's a pretty nice place. Like, it's pretty clean, it's pretty safe. And the 90s was kind of the tipping point where this was really starting. And the characters talk about how the neighborhoods are changing, and they talk about gentrification, about how things are becoming unaffordable and so on, right? And they also show the World Trade Center 3 times, like really prominently in the background or even the foreground. Like, did you pick up on this?
No, I didn't.
So first of all, every time, like if you just watch shows from the 90s that are set in New York and you see kind of the skyline, the World Trade Center is always in the middle because I think it was the biggest building in New York. And even if it wasn't focused on that, it was always part of the skyline, right? And so if you then fast forward to like 2002, it's missing and it's noticeable, right? The skyline completely changes. So if you just watch shows from the 90s or earlier, you can't not notice that these buildings are there, right? And here they do it 3 times and they do it on purpose. And as I was watching it, I said, okay, clearly this is not simply, oh, this is the 90s, or this is how they show it's the 90s. But I think they were doing it very deliberately. And I'm still not entirely sure what the symbolism of that is. I kind of landed on, it's got something to do with it's a different time and things are simpler and there's like worse things around the corner. That's kind of my interpretation. I don't know if that's what they intended to do with it, but I think the way it's shot and the number of scenes in which the World Trade Center is front and center in the image as Hank like arrives at a place or just as part of an establishing shot or something, it's got to be on purpose. But yeah, I'm not sure what that actually means. But given the kind of movie this is, it can't be an accident. It's not simply, oh, this is the 90s, so let's show the World Trade Center. If they did that once, I would say, okay, fine. But they didn't do it 3 times.
I'm trying to remember when it was shown.
I don't remember the exact scenes, but there's like 3 times where they show the skyline. And I think at one point, when they arrive at the storage place, right, like Russ and Hank, there's like the storage place is in the foreground, there's the river, and then there's Manhattan in the background, and there's like a giant World Trade Center in the background. It's the most prominent thing in the image. And there's like 2 others. I don't think it's linked to the specific scenes, but just they make sure you remember that these things are there.
Yeah. Okay, I can't think of a reason as to why. Is it maybe impending doom?
Yeah, something like that, right? Or it's like a different place, a different time, something like that.
Yeah, well, I think I've gone through most of my points. Do you have anything that you wanted to kind of like bring up or you want to ask?
No, I think we've covered it. Like, it's just like everything is intentional about this. It's very tightly plotted. It's just really satisfying to watch Hank go through this journey. That's one more thing. One thing I've been complaining about a few times is when movies show that a character has changed, but they don't show the change, right? Like a character is one way, and then in the next scene they are different. They have made the choice to be different, and we understand in what way they've changed, and we know why they've changed, but we don't see them changing. This drives me crazy. This is like in almost every movie. And in this movie, like 2 months ago or something, we talked about Equilibrium, which is this not very good sci-fi movie from 2001, right? Or 2002. And they're like a third of the movie is the main character wrestling with a decision. And we kind of in that review, we went into detail about why this is a better movie because of it. Where if you actually show the main character wrestle with a decision and make excuses and look for other ways out, it's more compelling when they finally make the choice. And this is like one of those screenwriting tips where if your story hinges on a character making a choice, you should show the choice. Like, I feel like I'm crazy for pointing this out, but it's just not in fashion right now. Like, most screenwriters today don't do this. And this movie just said, hey, let's make the movie this. Right? Because the entire thing is just Hank's journey. We see him kind of be an overgrown child. We see him stuck in this loop of self-pity and excuses. And we see him look for reasons to stay this way. And we see him running away from his problems and from the challenges. And then we see how that makes things worse for him. And then we see how he makes the decision to be better, but he fails. So he relapses. And then he makes, at some later point, another decision to try again to be better. And then finally, he is so far pushed into a corner that he has no choice but to own up to his problems and face them. And then he punches out a Russian mobster. And he's surprised. Right? There's a scene in the back alley. I think he's trying to chase after the detective, right? And one of the Russians kind of cuts him off, and they go into a fist fight, and Hank just knocks him out. And he's surprised. He didn't expect to win this fight, much less win it this easily. Like, he's not used to doing this. He's not used to taking charge, and he's not used to being proactive.
That kind of correlates to the idea of it's not as bad as you think it will go. Because usually when you think of a situation, right, and you're kind of like running away from a situation because you're expecting the worst, but then when you actually deal with that situation, the way that is resolved, you're like, oh, that was easy. That was simple. So I feel like that kind of correlates to that as well.
Yeah, and that's another thing. People talk a lot about identifying with characters, right? And I think people focus too much on the identity of the character, and that matters in some ways, right? I'm not saying it never matters, but a lot of the time it's enough to, like, in terms of identifying with a character, in terms of latching onto a story, to see one aspect of yourself in that character. And I think everybody can see a little part of themselves in Hank, where we've all kind of procrastinated, we've all run away from problems, we've all hoped it kind of goes away on its own, right? And then we see somebody do this, but in a very extreme way. And so we empathize with the early version of him. Even if we think we're better than him, we recognize ourselves, maybe our past selves, in him. And then we see him become better. And either we are proud of him for catching up with us, or we are inspired to do the same. Either way, we identify with him. And I think anybody can identify with that part. And I think that is really important for a character where you have to latch onto something in them. They have to do something, or there has to be something about them as a person or their background or whatever, where I say, okay, this person is like me in this one way. And if that part is important enough to the story, then that is the on-ramp to go on a journey with this character. And I've had this with characters who are nothing like me at all in various stories, but they are like me in this one way. And that way is important to the story, and therefore I go on a journey with them and I see myself in them, even if otherwise they're nothing like me. And I think this is something that this movie does really well, because the thing that makes Hank relatable is something that pretty much everybody has experienced at one point, which is indecision, the desire for a problem to just go away, the desire for somebody else to take care of it, because you just can't right now. Or being defined by a bad event in your past that is kind of holding you back, and you make excuses because you don't want to deal with it. That is also something that maybe not everybody, but many people can relate to. And that then makes this heightened action thriller 25 years ago more relatable or more accessible. Because we understand what Hank is thinking and why he does what he does on some level, right? And even when he's down a kidney and he goes drinking, 98% of me says, oh, that's stupid, I would never do that. But 2% of me thinks, yeah, kind of I've been in a situation where I kind of just wanted to go back to normal, even though I knew I couldn't. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that makes this character more relatable and the story more engaging.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that last point. I think we can kind of like use that as a vehicle to go into the last thoughts.
Yeah, so bottom line for me is this is a really well-made movie. It's just, if you like plot, if you like character, if you like just very intentional storytelling, where all the details end up mattering, and where they all kind of are bigger parts of a bigger puzzle that ends up being something exciting, then I think this is like one of the better movies this year. And so far, I think it might even have climbed into my top 3 for the year so far. I might have to think about. I'm not sure what it kicked out. I have to go back to our mid-year review for that. What was number 3 in that? But I feel like it's up there, and I'll see how I think about it in 2 or 3 months. But I just felt really good walking out of this. So this is a 5 out of 6 for me. Like this is, I recommend it to anybody who just likes character.
Damn, I haven't seen Daniel this ecstatic about a film in a long time. No.
Well, they do come along a few times a year, but like most movies don't rise to this level. And that is why I'm so excited about it, especially because like some of my favorite movies this year, I think it kicked out The Surfer. I think The Surfer made it to number 3. So I think that might now be number 4. And that was also something I did not anticipate and not something I had any kind of expectation for. And I just liked it. I just walked out of the theater having had a good time and feeling good about myself, feeling good about movies. And if a movie can do that, like this does not need to win all the Oscars, and this not that the Oscars have anything to do with like quality, but it's not the greatest movie of the decade or whatever. It's just a really good one that does everything right. And that does not happen that often.
Well, for me, I like this film. I wouldn't say it's been a long time, but it kind of feels refreshing, like watching a story unfold rather than watching a story be generic. Because a lot of the time, stories that we've seen in movies, you kind of know what's gonna happen. It's just like, okay, in which way are they gonna kind of like resolve this generic storyline? Whereas this one, Daniel was right, it felt like watching a puzzle and obviously seeing how different characters make sense into the progression of Hank's character and his journey. So I think that was the main thing. It was just kind of like seeing the story unfold, which I really enjoyed about this movie. Now, I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite films of the year. However, I would say it was fun. It was fun. It was definitely, I don't know if it's memorable for me, but at the same time, I wouldn't mind watching it again. It was a really good story. I would definitely recommend this film to anyone that's interested in going to watch it. It's worth it. A24, they've done their magic again. They have had some blunders, but this one is one of many very, very good films that they have under their catalog. So I would definitely recommend this one. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for tuning into this week's discussion. Apologies it didn't turn into a debate, but hey, man, it is what it is.
So if you like what we do, please tell a friend, because the algorithm won't. And if you hate what we do, please tell an enemy.
You heard it here first, guys. We will catch you next time. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.